Welcome to the Main Street Business Inside podcast. I'm your host, Matt Wagner, Chief Program Officer at Main Street America, a nonprofit leading a collaborative movement dedicated to strengthening communities through place-based economic development and community preservation. Each week, join me as I travel the country and take a deep dive into the personal journeys of downtown and neighborhood entrepreneurs. The stories that far too often go unnoticed and unheard. Whether you're a small business owner who wants to learn from your peers or a community leader looking to better support your local business base, Main Street Business Insights is here to provide you with the tools, strategies, and personal stories to help you and all of your Main Street businesses thrive. So subscribe now and tune in every Wednesday to get inspired by the individuals driving our communities forward. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Main Street Business Inside podcast. Grateful to be your host, Matt Wagner, Chief Innovation Officer at Main Street America. And since the pandemic in 2020, a time in which we also launched our first ever dedicated research department, we've conducted a number of national surveys examining the overall confidence, health, and challenges of America's Main Street small businesses and entrepreneurs. And over the last few years, we've kind of settled into this cadence of having a national fall and spring survey. But this is the first time we've actually released the survey findings through the podcast. So it's a great opportunity to share with you firsthand and actually enter in a dialogue with my guests today. So it's with great pleasure that I have with me to discuss really what we've learned from the more than 1,500 responses in this spring survey. I'd like to welcome Dr. Mike Powe, Senior Director of Research. I'm going to call him a hit workout guru and just an all-out amazing member of our team, and so grateful you could join, Mike. Welcome to the show. You know, for the listeners out there, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, then we'll start to dive into some of the findings and analysis from the survey.
Yeah, sure. So I've been working in the kind of preservation, historic preservation, community development, economic development, research world for about 12 years, a little over a dozen years. My background is actually not in preservation. I'm sort of surprised to be in a preservation world. And it means, it's about old buildings, but it's about a lot of other things. My background is in city planning and policy. I did a master's and a doctorate in planning when I was still a younger man, and started working for the Trust in 2013, and then jumped over to work with the esteemed host here in 2020, actually a week before the pandemic started.
That's right.
And the job I think we imagined was very different, is very different than the job that we sort of ended up doing, given the sort of, real challenges that COVID presented the week after I started. So yeah, we sort of been doing this small business survey work for basically the whole time I've been on the job.
Yeah. I mean, we had to, for the folks out there, if you remember that time, and I'm sure you do, we were working fast and furious because, as you can imagine, a lot of folks were really deeply interested and certainly concerned about what was happening to small businesses along our downtowns and neighborhood commercial districts. And I think that year, Mike, you did like 4 national surveys and even an SMS survey or something like that in 2020. And so, in some respects, I think, one, there's obviously been and continues to be a lot of national dialogue around Main Street businesses just overall. And sometimes it's centered, from a policy perspective or in a Main Street versus Wall Street. And I think what's really interesting about our work is that we have an opportunity, I think, to really properly define what a Main Street business is, as well as, I think, provide really credible data as to the general health or confidence or obviously challenges that are particular to Main Street businesses overall, and not how we think about small business at the U.S. Chamber level or even the National Federation of Independent Business level. And Mike, I wonder if you could provide a little bit of context about, Who is that? Who is the Main Street business? How do we define that based on who's responding to our surveys?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of talk about small businesses and Main Street businesses. I think we have sort of maybe the best read on the situation, kind of the best network, obviously, of folks across the country and community. So, over the years since 2020, we've probably heard from 15,000 small business owners. A bunch of those hopefully are multiple survey takers. But yeah, this most recent one heard from 1,500 plus, closer to 1,600 respondents in 47 states, plus the District of Columbia. I think it was more than 500 communities. So we're really getting a widespread reach into small towns and big cities alike. When we think about Main Street businesses, the really big thing that sets us apart, kind of sets Main Street businesses apart, is that they're very small.
Yeah.
So more than half of respondents to this survey had just one or two full-time staff, including the owner. So mom and pop, truly.
It's the definition for sure.
Exactly. 93% had fewer than 20 total staff, including part-time and seasonal or temporary employees. We asked for the first time in this survey whether folks lean on family or friends for unpaid labor, and more than half said they do on a frequent or occasional basis. Kind of gets you to think about whether is that unpaid labor sustainable? Sort of like the practices, sometimes like the mobile gum and duct tape that holds things together. And then with revenue, so 36%, I think in this survey, said they had less than $100,000 in gross revenue last year. More than half said they were less than $200,000, and under a quarter said they had more than $500,000.
Okay.
Over $500,000. So yeah, these are truly small businesses. I think it's also important to say that we tend to hear from demographically a certain segment. So I think mostly Gen X, or Gen X was the modal group we heard by age, 45%. Close to a quarter are millennials, close to a quarter are boomers. A big thing is the Main Street movement is really women.
Yeah.
So across all kinds of surveys, we hear generally about 70% of respondents are women. And in this survey, I think it's 69%, so just about 70% of the business owner respondents are women. About 2/3 are renters. About a third were started in 2020 or later, so the COVIDpreneur kind of cohort still continues. I think if you add in the last 10 years, I think it's something like closer to 60%. So, pretty new businesses, women-led businesses, tend to be renters, tend to be very, very small.
Yeah, very good. I think that matches really observationally, especially on women-owned businesses that over the last decade, I think have profoundly led a charge of in terms of how we think about revitalization efforts and small business activity on main streets. Given their importance to our communities and frankly the nation's economy, I think the statistic I saw at the U.S. Small Business Administration is like, if you think about this cohort, less than 20 employees, it's like close to 90% of all U.S. businesses, including those that are self-employed, fall into this. So it's a big part of the economy overall. And I wonder if you could explore what the data is suggesting about just current concerns in the performance in 2025 thus far.
Sure. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We started talking about COVID at the start of the conversation. It's a little bit of a COVID-like moment.
Yeah.
I mean, it's different in so many ways, but the concerns we heard from folks, the kind of confidence that folks feel, some of the challenges they're having are acute. And the beginnings of something that looks pretty severe.
Yeah.
So we asked, from a list of concerns, what are folks kind of feeling as business owners? The top three, so three responses got more than half of all respondents to answer the check. So that was cost of supplies, inventory, or equipment, with 72%. Decreasing customer spending, impacts of potential new tariffs. And I think this trio of concerns are really intertwined. I think you probably understand this better than me, Matt, but obviously potential tariffs or current tariffs are going to shake the supply chain. They're going to slow things down. It's going to lead to higher costs. So those two right off the bat. I think the degree to which the economy is in the conversation, the degree to which some folks are finding their employment situations changing, the threat of decreasing customer spending is both real and I think something that folks are on the lookout for. I think we're sort of at the beginning of something we might that might worsen. That's obviously a fear.
Yeah.
Big three. We asked about other stuff related to immigration policy and theft and safety and crime, and those concerns showed up. I think, but most of those were for 20% or less of all respondents. Some stuff like business debt or borrowing costs and rent, those things were sort of in between this 20%, 50% mark. But really, I think those big three really.
Yeah.
And just to continue a little bit, so where we start to see actual sort of not just concerns, but how folks are kind of faring. We asked how business finances have changed over the last 3 months, both in terms of revenue and in terms of net profit. And 48% of respondents said their net profit had decreased over the last 3 months.
Wow.
Close to 40%, 39% said revenues were down. Just for comparison, in 2023, a couple of springs ago, we asked a similar kind of question. We asked how revenue changed from 2021 to 2022, so year over year. And then only 21% reported declining revenue. And again, in this survey, that was 39%.
Wow, so big difference.
Double,
yeah.
But, so
sizable.
It really seems like the sort of receipts are reflecting this anxiety. And then just one more kind of point on this. Close to 2/3 or more than 2/3 of businesses said they've either already raised their prices or are planning to. And so in the midst of kind of concerns about consumer appetite, consumer spending, the prospect of also needing to raise your prices it's sort of it's a tenuous moment.
Exactly. Yeah, there's only so much like sort of pricing elasticity that a business can migrate to when consumer spending is also sort of crunched. So pricing sensitivity working in there. It's you mentioned again sort of the pandemic and some of the likeness. I think one of the more kind of interesting parts is that during the pandemic, like the pace of change was so quick. And things were always, I remember comments from small business owners of like, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And I think both in terms of maybe some policy and sort of the uncertainty, that's fairly consistent. But I think I also pick up on something somewhat unique, at least in conversations that revolve around I'm feeling sort of like stuck or frozen, especially in terms of just like making orders or something like that, because I'm unsure about what that price is going to look like when I take delivery or what have you, or am I going to get a price increase later on down the road? And I wonder on the qualitative side of our work, in particular to this survey, kind of what you picked up on, anything that you can share in terms of comments from some of the business owners.
Yeah, I think just what you're saying, I think what kind of what you might expect or fear is what folks are expressing. So, for instance, almost exactly to what you said, there was a quote from a business owner in Indiana that said, "I've received emails now from most all of my wholesale suppliers. Nearly all are imposing price increases or surcharges due to the tariff situation." we had we sent off the data to some kind of advisors for kind of comment and quote and reaction. And I know Mindy Bergstrom, I think, is a former podcast.
Yeah, Mindy's been on the show.
Cook's Emporium in Ames, Iowa, said the results reflect exactly how I'm feeling, uneasy. Seems like every week brings a new wave of emails about price increases or shipping delays or even freight increases. It's hard to predict what the next few months will hold for products and supply chain. So, exactly like you say, there's sort of a moment of kind of so much unpredictability that it can lend to inertia. It can lend to sort of just being kind of frozen.
Yeah.
Not really sure. There are other ways that the concerns kind of show up in the qualitative remarks, and I should say I'm really grateful that we had so many business owners respond, of course, but kind of lean in and tell us a little bit more about what's going on. This is the first time we've sort of leaned on the qualitative data to this extent. I hope folks read through the results and really kind of feel things a little bit more than just the data numbers might show, the charts might show. So a couple other quick ones. I heard from a business owner in Maine that they're located on a border town with Canada, and they've already seen a remarkable decrease in the customer base because of Canadians who don't want to come shop in the U.S. We heard specifically from a business owner in North Carolina who was affected by Hurricane Helene that their cost and availability of equipment and products has gone up. Debt is a real challenge.
Okay.
They're just hiring staff. There's housing crisis is making it difficult to get potential employees to find housing. Other folks just saying their ingredient costs are up. A lot of folks saying that they're concerned about shutting down, whether, maybe the Illinois business said the next 6 months, Michigan business said they can't survive another year. They've been at this for 8 years, including the pandemic. So, it feels really, unfortunately, like akin to the pandemic in a lot of ways.
Yeah. The we've been running this survey, as a series for since, as we mentioned, May of 2020, and I think over the last 3 years in particular, in our typical spring and fall cycle, one of the things that we've tried to get at a little bit more is some more longitudinal. How can we see and forecast trends over time, or see trend lines over time? And one in particular we've asked is along confidence. So there is I think it's the University of Michigan, although I hate to say the Michigan, people know I went to Ohio State, consumer confidence survey that they're known for. And I feel like we're developing our own here in the Main Street business confidence rating. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about this data point in particular, what you're seeing in this year's or this, spring's data, but also how does that compare and relate to what we've seen in the past?
Yeah, sure. So this is one question that we sort of not touched since we started asking in 2022. And sometimes we feel like we could have made this question a little bit better, but so we ask, as you think about the next 3 months, how confident are you that your business will perform successfully? And between fall 2022, spring 2023, fall 2023, pretty consistent, pretty high. So we asked on this 10-point scale. Numbers, the averages were 7.6, 7.7, 7.7 again. And as we sort of got into 2024, we started to see the numbers drop to 7.5, 7.2 in fall 2024, and then kind of as folks might expect, in this spring survey, we fell to 6.7. So from 7.2 to 6.7, a half point drop. That's the biggest change in the record. As far as the 6 surveys we've asked this question, the biggest kind of survey to survey delta, and obviously it's the lowest number we've kind of heard. We did look at the crosstabs a little bit with this one.
Okay.
We looked at businesses that launched in the last 5 years. Those folks tended to be a little less confident. That's the 6.6 average. businesses with only 1 or 2 employees, the mom and pops, which so many of them are, is 6.5 average. And retail businesses, I think, as the sort of segment, were the lowest with 6.4 average.
Okay.
That's still about a third of our overall sample of retail businesses. So, yeah, pretty distressing. I mean, it's
I think also
an interesting survey. Yeah, but it's just sort of like some of these headlines are not are kind of get you feeling downtrodden.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we're on our heels.
Yeah, it does have that 2020 vibe to it, and I think the fortunate thing, hopefully, is that businesses are hopefully developed kind of that muscle of agility, resiliency shifts. But I think it's a lot of our listeners are downtown professionals, working in main streets or what have you, and what can we do as communities to support them through this challenging time. And it's really not a big surprise. I mean, it's interesting to hear some of the segmentation there on this data that your older businesses may have either greater diversity of sort of business revenue lines or more padding perhaps, or even access to capital because of track record, where our newer businesses may still be sort of in that particular phase of their journey and have less nimbleness or access to resources as a result, especially in terms of size. And then on the retail front, so susceptible to consumer spending challenges and inventory that might be more prone for sort of global supply chains. So really fascinating to see the breakdown there. As we wrap up and during the go ahead.
One thing I feel like it's important to note. Yeah, so there's so many ways this is like the pandemic. The data really expresses this like clear uncertainty, this concern, this loss of confidence, and we talked about the ways that folks are maybe frozen up by the supply chain concerns or sort of pricing concerns. But we're not in a rush to build vaccines. We're not unable to be around each other in person. In so many ways, this is not the pandemic.
Correct.
Sort of how you say. Reason for optimism, if you look forward, is sort of this is not insurmountable in the same way. This is not human health. This is not a contagion. This is sort of a matter of supply chains that sort of folks getting to barracks. To some extent, consumer spending might not really drop off. I mean, so far I think the jobs data nationally is not super discouraging. There's still always the sort of wondering what the next month's report's going to say. But so far things have not, the bottom hasn't dropped out. So I feel like this data tells us that folks are freaked out. But yeah, I still find a little hope in that we're not sort of reimagining all of our public spaces and our workspaces, and we're not building.
Yes.
This is a different kind of crisis in the making, perhaps. It's not unavoidable.
Yeah,
it's not just going to take us years to develop vaccines.
Exactly. It is different in that realm, and I think there is certainly reason to be optimistic and hopeful. One, because I think there's a lot of support, and I think we gained a lot of recognition, frankly, as an outgrowth of the pandemic about the importance of Main Street small businesses to our local communities and kind of just quality of life in many respects, because we did see things when they were closed down and not wanting to see that again. And I think there's some economic transitions happening at this point. There's some demographic shifts that are part of the equation that probably don't get talked about a lot, as boomers are retiring and spending less, and there's just less capital coming behind that, at least initially. Gen Z will eventually make up for that as another huge generation, but they're gaining traction as a spending cohort. So there's just a lot of economic transition happening in the market, and so sort of leads me to our kind of a wrap up that this is what we do. This is what research one of your aims obviously is kind of keep a tab on what's happening in this particular sector, and I'm wondering how you're thinking about kind of what comes next, given maybe both some uncertainty and then potential lags in some of the economic figures. What's your expectation for research as you think about 2025 then?
For research, I think it's fair to say we'll follow up likely multiple times with business owners. I want to make sure we're not wearing out our welcome. I do think Main Street America, we got to think about what we can do to assist. So, yeah, I think it's easy enough. It's really easy to be a researcher, right? It's easy to ask these questions, and appreciate the gravity of the data. So I don't want to wear out our welcome and ask too many times for people to give us feedback, share their insights and share how they're feeling. I think it could be a good time to go to maybe not actually an SMS survey.
Yeah.
Text message surveys to try to get during COVID, you alluded to it, to try to get folks to kind of respond very quickly. We know folks don't have much time. I don't know if we'll go back to that, but I think we could go to really short surveys, on the order of just 3 to 5 questions or something, just to check in. I don't really know. It's a tough moment in so many ways. Main Street America offers a lot of resources to small businesses. I think we got more coming, but with the sort of current moment, I think we're going to need our own agility.
Exactly.
We can. So, I think this is part of the new innovation division at Main Street America, and how we can sort of act quickly, respond quickly, pilot things out, and see what's kind of working, what's helping.
Great.
So, I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah. I don't think this will be the last time our audience hears from us in terms of sort of data points, or just more. I could see qualitative. We do talk with so many small businesses out there, and sometimes it's just better to understand kind of where they're at on their unique journey is really critical insight and representative of many others in so many respects. I know by the time the show, as you're listening to this or watching it on YouTube, we will have already put out to media and to the network Mike's write-up and blog and the findings from the survey in more detail. So what we'll do is we'll make sure that we attach all of that within the show notes. So if you want to download it, or obviously you can reach out to us at Main Street America, and we can certainly send a copy out, but it will be available on our website as well as in the show notes here as part of the podcast. So Mike, I just want to thank you so much again for all the work, and a shout out to Emmy and Aoife on your team, who are just tremendous, I know, resources to you and to the organization at Main Street America. And so we're so thankful for all their hard work and diligence here in supporting the small business world, and certainly for the podcast here. And just a big shout out, and thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, and thank you for shouting out Emmy. Emmy, my retailer colleague in Seattle, really did help us think through the survey, and thank you to the folks out there who served as advisors. Catherine Ross, our friend in Tacoma, Washington, really helped us with questions. So, no one wants to celebrate these findings, but I'm really grateful for the folks we're working with, folks around us. Grateful for you, Matt. So, thanks.
Yeah, you bet. Anytime, we'll have you back on. All right. Thanks, Mike. I'm going to do a little quick closeout here for all of you. As always, we're so appreciative for joining the show, and for hopefully you've gained a lot of insights and can reflect from the data that was presented. That's really going to do it for this episode, of course. But as always, if you're a business owner, and likewise to my place professional colleagues out there, I hope this episode has provided plenty of new insights, solutions, and inspiration. And as consumers, please continue to support your local small businesses and, of course, tell their stories. They're so really important to our local and national economies, and most importantly, they promote and provide quality of living to the places we all call home. A quick plug for checking out our library, our growing library of podcasts and training videos on our YouTube channel. And if you're enjoying this content, we just ask that you please hit the subscribe button wherever that is on your screen or in your Spotify or iTunes account, and rate and review us. And as always, be sure to tell your friends, family, pets, neighbors, and colleagues so you all can catch the next episode. So thanks for listening. For all the support. How is your Main Street planning to celebrate America's 250th? Beacon Design partners with communities like yours to create custom, American-made keepsakes that raise funds and celebrate local pride. These keepsakes turn historic moments into lasting memories, and they're perfect for any community event. Beacon Design will help you create a memorable keepsake that's crafted in the USA and trusted by communities nationwide. So visit beacondesign.com to learn more. Don't just mark the moment, make it memorable.